All right, hey, on this episode of Fight, Outnumbered, and Win, I want to help you with understanding a difference between enemy-focused and terrain-focused missions. All right, John, I'll be sitting at MDMP or I'll be listening to senior leaders talk. And throughout the dialogue, I'll hear this idea. Well, this is a terrain-focused mission, not an enemy-focused mission. You ever heard that?
Yes, sir.
All right. And what does that mean?
I don't really know. Aren't we supposed to kill the enemy?
Well, I've heard it too, and
Yeah.
I've seen it where they've stopped in an MDMP session, and the senior leader will go, "Is this an enemy-focused mission or a terrain-focused mission?" And then they pontificate a bit. You're gonna have to do the senior leader thing, pontificate about this. Enemy-focused or terrain-focused?
That's undefeated, by the way.
Yeah, and I've sit there, and as a staff officer, I'd sit there and listen to that, and I think, wow, I don't know. This is going to be an enemy-focused mission, so therefore, and then that just kind of, and that's the last I hear of it. And then we go on our planning ways, and I never really visited again. So want to offer you kind of what the difference, what do they mean by enemy-focused versus terrain-focused missions? Okay, so most of the time when you've been given a mission, you'll probably see something like this. So we'll have some sort of hilltop, right? And then the mission will be to seize hill, or this will be like objective Longstreet. I don't know why. I grew up, it was always Confederate generals' name. Objective Longstreet, okay? And then we'll usually template enemy on objective Longstreet. So 2 up, 1 back, because that's how we always do it, right? 2 up, 1 back, and then the tanks always be in the rear. I mean, that's always right. And then, so we'll template the enemy on objective Longstreet, and then what do we do with every objective? We typically quadrify it, right? So there'll be 1, there'll be 2, 3, and 4. Okay. And then there's your mission, usually to seize objective Longstreet. Now, throughout, what I mean by a terrain-focused objective is something like this, is that you're trying to seize a piece of ground. This is very normal for us, right? We do this all the time. In fact, I think that we turn every mission into a terrain-focused mission, right? Now, I think we do this because, one, frankly, it's easy. Why?
I mean, it's easy, I guess, to define the results.
Yeah.
Like, if you got it, you got it,
Yeah.
right?
You got it, you got it. Excellent. Also, hills don't move. Bridges don't move often. A building doesn't move. And so when you're aiming at something, the best place you want to shoot at, if you just think about it, is to aim at something that doesn't move. And so therefore, no matter, if I've found that, if you hear like someone says, well, it's an enemy-focused or a terrain-focused, inevitably it will kind of devolve to a terrain-focused mission because it's comfortable, because it's easy to aim at. It's easy to arrange your operations. You can follow the troop leading procedures, make a tentative plan, initiate movement, reconnaissance, and your reconnaissance is all terrain focused, right? We got to look for the little wadi that leads up to it, or maybe the bridge or the road. Everything's very concrete because it's terrain focused. How do you organize forces when you organize a terrain focused mission? Well, typically you're going to have a support force. You're going to have a security force. You're going to have an assault force. So you usually typically organize that. The security force is providing security as you're moving up, looking for left and right limits. Support force is going to lay down, some sort of base of fire, right? And then your assault force is going to always go right, because everyone always does. They always go to the right and flank to the right and assault some kind of hill like that. Yeah? Then you're going to have your security force up here looking this way, and kind of orient that way and orient this way, and then somebody looking back. Fair?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Very comfortable,
Standard.
very ordinary, and most operations will usually devolve to that regardless of what kind of mission you're given. Terrain-focused missions, though, doctrinally, will typically have something like seize, or control, or block, something like that, right? However, what happens if you get a mission that's called destroy, or defeat. What kind of mission is that?
Or enemy focused.
Enemy focused. Now, but how does it change though when you arrange your forces? How does that change the very nature of what you're trying to do with an enemy focused mission?
There's more variables they can do.
What do you mean?
They can move. They can do. They can not. They're not going to fight fair. They get a vote in your mission as well.
I would even argue it's not they don't get a vote. That it is. Think about a boxing analogy. I always try to box. I'm not good at it. But anyway, if I was trying to box, how much of my consideration is what you're doing? All of it.
All right.
How much do I think about the ring? A little bit. How much do I think about, you're fighting out of one corner? Okay, a little bit. All my focus is what you're doing, right? However, though, when you're enemy focused, how it changes is all of your focus now should change onto the enemy. What I mean by that is your most important consideration is finding where the enemy is and understanding the enemy moves. And sometimes you think there's 10 and there's actually 20. Or you think there are motorized and actually they have tanks. Or they are moving forward or moving back. All these things, your most important consideration is finding the enemy. So does this construct work? I would say not in an enemy-focused mission set, because your prime consideration is finding the enemy. So if you're trying to destroy the enemy, the first thing is you could still have a hill, same thing, but now the hill is just part of it. You know what I'm saying? The hill is just a consideration. What really looking for is trying to find where in this world is actually the enemy. First off is when you do your mission planning, and if you have an enemy-focused mission, which I'm going to argue every mission pretty much is enemy-focused, because typically the hill's not the problem. The bridge isn't the problem. It's the enemy that's defending the bridge or holding the hill that's the problem. Even if you're given a mission to seize a hill, without an enemy, it's just a hiking trip. If you're trying to seize a hill, the problem isn't that the hill's there. The problem is you got an enemy on top who's trying to kill you. So your big problem is trying to find the enemy. So therefore, like as I talked about in our last video, the first thing you do is you have to look at it from the enemy's point of view. So that means I would actually walk over, either personally if I could, like if I was defending, I'd drive out and actually see it from the enemy's point of view. If I couldn't, I usually get map software and I look at it like on CPCE or whatever, and I flip it around and I try to drive it like the enemy would. And I put my mindset as, okay, if I was the enemy, how would I defend or attack given this avenue of approach? That would give me my template. That's how I would template, and I would arrange my forces the way I would if I was them. Then, once I've done that, I'm going to task organize my forces to find the enemy. So I would have a security force, okay? Then I would have a reconnaissance force. And then I would have some sort of assault force or to pin the enemy down when I found him. But the most important thing is I'd have a security force that would move out to provide my traveling overwatch. But my most important thing is my reconnaissance force to go out and then first look for and find the enemy. Where do you look for first?
To find the enemy, sir?
Yeah, where would you look for first? If you're doing this, where would you look for him?
I guess a place that's an advantage to the enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So something that maybe is tied to resources, maybe tied to protection, things like that.
You had the close answer. Where would you?
Sorry.
No, but where would you? You already just heard the answer. Where would you first look? Tied to resources? Why? Because
what
that's
they
what
need
you would
to
do if you were him.
Yeah, yeah,
You see
sir.
what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
right. Yeah,
Because
yes,
you'd
sir.
think like that.
Yes, sir.
You're like, I need to be close to this. I need to have this. This is where my cachet would be. Or this is where good cover and concealment. This is where I got good lanes of fire if I was him. So I would first start looking where I would be if I was him. And then, let's say your reconnaissance force goes out. Oh, I templated those tanks here. Well, they're not there. Now here's the important question. Why aren't they there? Instead of just sitting there going, well, they're not there, you have to think, well, then why aren't they there? How is that? They're doing something. Most times they're setting you in for a trap. They're setting you in to fix you frontally and attack you from the side. But you have to think about, then you start doing deductions. Well, if they're not there, where else would they be? Well, I template them here. They're not there either. So therefore, they've got to be on the north side of this hill. But most of your effort is going to be trying to find the enemy. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Now, think about it in terms of troop leading procedures. When you do it this way, all of your make a tentative plan is trying to find the enemy. Initiate movement is trying to find the enemy. Conduct reconnaissance is trying to find the enemy. You complete the plan, really, or you're completing your plan is how you're going to find the enemy. Once you've actually found the enemy, now you really just turns into a battle drill, squad attack, platoon attack, which you know how to do it.
Right.
But most of your consideration is trying to find where the enemy actually is versus where you think you are. If you do it this way, this is what you're not leading with your chin, which is an analogy of when you go into a fight like this, just waiting to take a blow to find where the enemy is. You're actually leading with your reconnaissance in an effort to find where the enemy actually is, and then you execute basically your battle drills. And that to me is different versus how we typically do it, where everything becomes terrain focused. So I'm trying to coach you up on is conducting reconnaissance and finding where the enemy actually is the way to win. Do not launch an attack. Let me say this again. In order for an attack to be successful, a deliberate attack to be successful, you have to have identified at least 70% of the enemy's known location. Let me say that again. In order for a deliberate attack to be successful, you need to have identified 70%, at least above 70% of the enemy's known location, and have disseminated that to your platoon leaders and your squad leaders. It's not just important if you know it, it has to get to where your subordinate leaders know. Now imagine you're being a young platoon leader. We're attacking to destroy the enemy in vicinity along hill 1, 2, 3, okay? You're moving out in your platoon, and as you move out, I go, John, I just found out, I use a drone, you got 3 tanks, and they're sitting just on the back side of this hill, right above a military crest, about 400 meters from the top. Here's a picture of the imagery. This is where they are. How does that change how you do things?
I mean, I can make a well-defined plan how I'm going to kill them.
Yeah.
Well thought out, and yeah, I know where they are. I can tell my guys how we're going to do it right then and there.
And I tell you, that's how they do it at NTC, and that's why the Black Horse is so successful against Blue 4. Before a Black Horse launches their attack, they have found almost every single Blue 4's location and have passed it down to the lieutenants at least 2 hours prior to the attack. Think about that. Before they launch their attack, they have identified almost every single Blue 4 location and have passed that information to their platoon leaders 2 hours before the attack. And we wonder why. They just beat hell out of us. But we don't ever learn a lesson. Black Horse at NTC does a good job being very enemy focused. But we keep staying, sometimes we put our blue hat on, we just keep hovering being terrain focused. So what I'm trying to coach you up on is the big takeaway from being terrain focused versus enemy focus. Terrain focus will be easier. You'll want to gravitate toward that. You want to arrange your forces and always, because that's how you've always been trained up. If you train like everyone else, you'll be like everyone else. You got to break that habit and become enemy focused. Your enemy focus means finding the enemy and being comfortable with the idea that the enemy won't be where you think they are. They move and they will continue to adapt to circumstances. If you know that, just like hunting the bear, and you're not surprised the bear moves or runs around. If you think about, I'm going to hunt the bear and put all your effort at arranging your forces to find the enemy, once you then find the actual enemy's location and you disseminate it to subordinate leaders, then they'll come up with a really effective plan, just like you said, and you'll fight outnumbered and win. So, 1, do not attack until you found at least 70% of the enemy's location, or don't, and then just get the floor mopped with you because you didn't do it. So remember, if you train like everyone else, you'll be like everyone else. If you are enemy focused and make that your prime consideration, you'll be different than almost everyone else. If not, well then you'll fight and lose. So that's how it goes. All right, thanks for watching. Fight outnumbered and win.